They were bleeding the clock out. That's what they do. And I wanted to get the upper hand back, and it's easy hindsight, and I get it, I get that. But I don't regret those decisions, and that's hard. It's hard because, we didn't come through. It wasn't able to work out.
Dan's going to catch a lot of heat for the fourth down decisions. I know how you guys feel about when he keeps the ball in your hand.
Yeah.
How much do you think those changed the momentum of the game?
No, I loved them. We got to convert.
Huge, the first one. Yeah, huge. I think that was the turning point. And just getting Goff off the spot, kind of making him uncomfortable back there. We knew we finally had a quarterback who's going to be on that spot often.
All right, Dan, you spent 7 years of your career with the Detroit Lions. We know how badly you would have liked to see them win and get there. How much of this collapse are you putting on Dan Campbell and the coaching?
Yeah, very little. Let's be clear, though, this is a disastrous collapse for Detroit. To be up 14-0, to be up 24-7, and to lose in that way, disaster. I put very little on Dan Campbell. Everyone's talking about kicking field goals and whatnot. Let's put into context. One, this is not analytics-driven only. This is who we are, Detroit, who we're playing against San Francisco. Detroit was dominating this game in any facet that they wanted to throughout this game. They were running the ball in the perimeter that we talked about. Jared Goff was delivering the ball. Gibbs was being spectacular with the ball in his hands. The 4th and 2. So third down happens. Fred Warner makes a great play. 4th and 2, they go for it. And this game really comes down to the third quarter. They choked in the third quarter. Detroit choked in the third quarter. 4th and 2, they throw the ball to Josh Reynolds. He drops it. Then we come back, and then there's going to be a drop on third down by Josh Reynolds in the third quarter. And then there's the fumble by Gibbs in the third quarter. All led to 17 points. Dan Campbell not kicking field goals doesn't lead to those 2 drops. Dan Campbell not kicking field goals doesn't lead to that Gibbs fumble. The reality was they've made their way. They were outgained 170-42 in the third quarter. They're like 2 drops in that third quarter alone. That's the most in a game that they've had all season long. All season long. Dan Campbell did not do that. That's their first turnover in the playoffs, that Gibbs fumble. This is not on Dan Campbell whether to kick field goals or not. They won 4 games this year by deciding to play that style of football. This was in the third quarter. They choked. They had done things that they had not done all season and all playoffs long. Credit San Francisco and Brock Purdy. They took advantage of them. But this is about that third quarter and just disastrous collapse more so than kicking field goals or not kicking field goals.
I respectfully disagree with you. I like Dan Campbell a lot. I think he's done this franchise around and making them formidable. I really am fond of him as a coach. But I can't absolve him from some blame yesterday. Like, for example, I'm looking at these numbers in the first half, Dan Orlovsky, in terms of you running the football, and I'm saying to myself, what the hell is the problem? 21 carries for 148 yards and 3 scores in the first half. You are running roughshod over the San Francisco 49ers. You are literally looking like you're playing bully ball, Shannon. You're looking like you're playing bully ball. You're pushing them around. You look more physical. Gibbs and Montgomery coming out of the backfield doing what they want to do. Trick play to Jamison Williams. He skirts down for the side, down the middle of the field for the first score of the game. We watch them. To know that you can run the football, what do we say about things? 2 things travel and come NFL playoff time: defenses and running games. You got those 2 going for you, chances are you're going to win a game. And guess what? The San Francisco 49ers were shook. They were getting pushed around. They were getting pummeled. And Detroit had all the momentum in the world. What possible excuse can you have for running the football 8 times in the second half for 34 yards? Why? Because Gibbs, fumbled, and as a result of that, you got nervous? Why didn't you continue to just run the football? You could have done that. You could have tried that. You should have tried that. I'm not going to blame them so much about Purdy because Purdy is not known as the most mobile quarterback in the world. You didn't anticipate that his mobility would be such a factor as the game waned. I get that, and I understand that. When they went for it the first go-round, 4th and 2 or 4th and 3, whatever it was, I blame Josh Reynolds for that. He dropped the ball. You got to catch that pass. Got to catch that pass.
Right.
But the second go-round, when they did it in the third quarter, when they were trying to stop the momentum and stop the bleeding, the play just looked a bit discombobulated. People weren't on the same page. I'm sorry, that's not just on the play.
No, that play happens because of Armstead. The play is there. They're going to have an in route to Reynolds, huge completion. Armstead becomes Armstead, they do a little two-man stunt inside. He gets unblocked.
Yeah. But what I'm talking about is how Josh Reynolds, I mean, obviously, you threw him the ball. The ball wasn't near him is what I'm trying to say. It wasn't near him, all right? That's all I'm saying. You can break that down if you want to. I'm not disputing that. I'm saying at the end of the day, you're going for it because you've had a tendency to go for it on fourth down. You've done it almost more than anybody else in the league.
And been great at it.
And you've been at a 52% rate. Major props to you. But it didn't work yesterday. And all I'm trying to say to you is that you got to continue to run that football. You got to find a way to stop that bleeding. You got a 24-7 lead at halftime. You do not have an excuse to lose that game and to get blitzed in the third quarter the way that you did. I mean, not only was the game tied, the game was tied by the end of the third quarter. Tied by the end of the third quarter. And ultimately, you ended up scoring 27 unanswered points before you put up something. I'm sorry. I got to look at the coach there, and I got to say, yo, man, this was not your shining moment.
You're absolutely right, Stephen A. I agree with you, Stephen A. I disagree with you, D.O. Stephen, I remember when I was in Denver and being one of the leaders, every time we left the locker room during a playoff game, I would always tell the guys, don't you be the one. Don't you be the one that get a penalty that cost us. Don't you be the one that fumbled the football that cost us. Coach, don't you be the one to try to be the smartest man that ever played to coach the game. Take those points. Because instead of being tied, you're still up 3. Because now if you're tied, because see now, if you take the points, instead of being down 3, they score that touchdown when you miss it on 4th down to be down 10. Now you're down 3, and guess what? You go get a touchdown. Now all of a sudden you're tied. In that situation, D.O., you can't always. What is Andy Reid by nature? He's an aggressive play-calling coach. What's Patrick Mahomes? He's an aggressive quarterback. But in the third and fourth quarter, with the exception of one play, what did they do, D? They took the air out of the ball because they say the last thing that we want to do is give the Ravens any type of momentum. It's okay to coach one way in one game and then be some way totally different. We saw that with Atlanta. Everybody said, well, that's what they do. They throw the ball. You're up 28-3. Run the effing football. Detroit, you had dominated the 49ers defensive line in the first half. It was 2nd and 12, and you hand the ball to Gibbs, and he go get 13, 14 yards. Montgomery up the middle for 5. You're getting 5, 8, 10, 12, 14 yards a clip, and you run the ball 8 times in the second half?
But Shannon, we got to figure out
what we do.
I don't know how many snaps Detroit had in the second half. I don't think that they ran, I think the time of possession was majorly swung and snaps were swung in the second half. San Francisco in a big advantage over Detroit. So I didn't walk away from that game saying, oh my gosh, Detroit abandoned the run in the second half. That third quarter, they got blitzed, and it was because of drops and that turnover. That's why they lose this game. They don't lose this game because could you imagine, Shannon? Here's my thing, though, Shannon. If he kicks field goals in that situation, we don't know if they would have won or not. Mm-hmm. There's people who believe that they would have. I don't know, okay? If they kick field goals in that game and they end up losing that game, we would be killing Dan Campbell today. All of a sudden, you switched up and became somebody that you're not. That's what we're talking about with Lamar a little bit in the Baltimore game. Like you tried to be something that you weren't all season long. That's who they've been, and they've been great at it. They're 20 out of 24 on 4th and 3 or less this year.
Let me ask you a question. How many times did they have 17-point leads, though?
Shannon, that's not the way he's thinking about it.
You in a championship game, D.O. You have to change your way of thinking. You can't think this because you go home. Because you go home and everybody's calling you dumb.
But Shannon, they're drops. Like we can't look. If Josh Reynolds catches either of those balls, they're likely winning the game. If they block Armstead, they're likely winning the game. So we're sitting here killing the coach about it. We love the guy for going for 2 all the time. They beat the Chargers because they went for it a bunch of times. I think they beat the Bears because they went for it a bunch of times. Like they won multiple games this year because of the way that they played. And they executed it. We can't sit it. He's got to catch the ball.
I just believe, Stephen A., in certain situations, you have to change your way of thinking. That's just me. And in that situation, that would have been one because we know how aggressive Andy Reid is. We know what Patrick Mahomes. But sometimes, D.O., it's okay to change up. And I get it. Yes, You had kind of lost the momentum. You go for it on third down. You go for it on fourth down. You miss it. They kick a field goal. You kick the ball off to your Gibbs fumble. Now what was a 17-point lead all of a sudden is a 7-point lead, and you've gotten the crowd back in the game. The Lions had done a great job. The one thing you want to do when you go on the road